Happy Spider-Man No Way Home reaches $1 billion! Hello everyone, Jesterabelle is back, and if you're wondering where I've been and where this review have been, I have been sick for the past 2 weeks. Maybe not that long, but I did manage to see Spider-Man No Way Home twice. I am very much intending to go see it many more times now that I'm feeling a lot better, and oh my goodness was this movie an event, and I am so glad that it crossed $1 billion. They were saying at the beginning of this year, they were saying last year that no movie, well, movies in like 10 years from now, if theaters were still around, that it would take 10 years, if that, if theaters didn't collapse, for us to see a movie that made $1 billion at the box office again. And I am so glad that this movie proved that wrong, and it proved that if people actually are hyped about a movie and if they actually have incentive to go see a movie, then they will show up in droves. It's only been out for a week now and the movie crossed $1 billion once again, and there's articles out there of experts trying to figure out why that is, and it's kind of obvious. This was the only movie this year that had this amount of hype and excitement. I didn't feel any hype around any other movie this year, and so I was wondering when this movie coming out, if it would make a ton of money, if it would shock people how much money this movie would make. And it is surprising people, and I'm so glad that that prediction came true. But why? Why are people loving Spider-Man No Way Home so much? Well, obvious reason is that it's a movie that brings back fan favorite characters from the best actors: Alfred Molina, William Dafoe, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield. Yes, you probably know that they're out there by now, that they're in the movie. This is completely a spoiler review, as if anyone hasn't had this movie spoiled for them already. There's just no way that you couldn't know that. But let's get to it. To have these characters return for this movie is one thing, because you would never think you would ever see these actors play these characters again. This first Spider-Man Raimi franchise was done. The Amazing Spider-Man franchise kind of collapsed, disappointingly, because Andrew Garfield is my favorite actor to portray Spider-Man, so I'm really glad they brought him back. But what was more important to me about the movie is the way it brought back everyone, but it gave them very satisfying arcs, because they know that we love these villains and they know that we love these heroes, so it's like they thought, what better way to bring these characters back and have them interact but have Peter Parker try to give his villains a redemption. That's what's really great about the movie, that you get to see each character. Each one of these Spider-Man villains is very broken, and it's a little bit like Batman villains, is that they're very evil characters, but they're also very broken. And so to see them get a chance at redemption in this movie was kind of what made me really want to see it, because that's satisfying when you love these characters and they've gotten their tragic ending in these other franchises, but here they're given a second chance. And it makes sense and it's natural, and I think that my favorite character actually to get a redemption in this movie was Electro, because everyone hated him in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but here they made him cool, they made him funny, they made him interesting. I loved it whenever he was on screen, and I thought that it really worked through the interactions between the characters, you know, when like Sandman and Electro are comparing how they fell into various places and became supervillains, and they're like, gotta be careful where you fall. And I think that that works, because when you see these characters together, you want to see them interact, but it's not too heavy on it. There's jokes here and there, but it's mainly a movie that's able to keep the serious moments. Now, I'll be honest and say that I was not a person who was a big fan of the Homecoming movies. I did several marathons of these Spider-Man movies leading up to it, and I just couldn't get through Homecoming, and I didn't even watch Far From Home, because to me they weren't really Spider-Man. I think that Tom Holland's Spider-Man fits better in the context of the Avengers movies, when he can be the comic relief and he can play off those characters, but by himself, like I said, they're very much Disney Channel Spider-Man movies. They are very shallow. They rely a lot on humor and very superficial problems. Like for Far From Home, a big joke was like how superficial teen romances can be, and that's how the movie felt to me. But this movie is really a Spider-Man movie, and what I love about it is it fixes all the problems that Spider-Man fans had with this franchise, and you really get to that. It's great to see Peter Parker try to you know, redeem these villains, but the moment where you really feel it's a Spider-Man movie is that moment when Aunt May is murdered and she essentially becomes the Uncle Ben of this universe. And you get Peter not only shocked by her murder, but you get him shot at. You get him basically standing on and watching Jameson in this gigantic TV telling him that indirectly that everything he touches gets destroyed. And I'm like, that is Spider-Man. That kind of cruelty to the Spider-Man character where he cannot get up without being beaten down and beaten down 10 times more. That is Spider-Man, and that is the kind of trauma and the loss that his character goes through. That's my favorite shot in the entire movie. That is what really made the movie for me. And there was still just so much after that, because after that Toby and Andrew show up. And Andrew Garfield was my favorite part of the movie because I love how they continue to portray him almost on a meta level as kind of the loser Spider-Man, and I thought that worked because they know, it's like they know on a meta level that a lot of people didn't like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, which is completely undue in my opinion, so they portray him as a character who really thinks of himself as a failure and is really self-depreciating because of his failure to save Gwen, and we get to see that kind of a dark and emotional side to his Spider-Man. So he's his fully formed character when he appears in the movie. He's not just a fan service. He's just not there to just, you know, have fun and you know, it was not just shallow fan service where characters you recognize show up and they have a good time and then they leave. It was something that was actually thoughtful. They were thoughtful about the Spider-Man coming in. They were thoughtful about the villains, and it was just also satisfying how they actually considered the setup and payoff of these characters without just thinking of that putting them together and making them, you know, joke around with each other was going to be enough. So it's not only incredible to see all these characters together again, but it's incredible that they're actually continuing their stories in a respectful way, and that they actually recognize the flaws in the Homecoming movies, and that they actually put an effort to fix those flaws. They even have a meta acknowledgement to the Iron Boy Jr. thing in the movie, and they go in a completely different direction than that. And that's just so rare. They ruined that with Star Wars, they're ruining Star Trek. There's just so many franchises these days where they don't get it. DC is one of them, where they will look at the even just looking at the box office numbers of something and not taking into consideration any criticism, which is what they could have done with Far From Home because it made $1 billion. They didn't need to really change anything. They were making money, but they actually made the considerations here and made a movie that is making even more than Far From Home because of how good it is. So, I mean, that's why this movie is making $1 billion and making even more than that in the middle of a the quote-unquote pandemic that kept everyone away from theaters. It's because it's not just because it's Spider-Man and people like Spider-Man, but it delivers this fan service on what people want to see in a way that's actually thoughtful, and we never get that anymore, and that's why this movie is such a success. Now, I want that Hollywood to take the right lessons from this. People are saying they probably won't, and that's true. Probably their lesson is that there's going to be a lot more movies that are just about taking actors and characters from different universes and making them meet. You know, I think that's going to be beyond DC and Marvel. I think a lot of different movies and franchises are going to try to replicate that. That's what happens. That's what happened with the first Avengers when that came out. All of a sudden, every movie had to be this big team-up movie where the characters have to put aside their differences to save the world. Everything had to be a superhero movie. You know, everything had to be the MCU formula. It had to try to be an interconnected universe. So I think that as Hollywood kind of is just kind of a production, with producers who don't really have a creative side and are only looking at the marketing, I think they're going to take the wrong lessons from that. But I would just really hope that they understand that how this movie was fan service done right, because there is fan service out there these days, but they don't have the substance behind this. They don't have the thought. They don't have the actual care and understanding of the characters and universe. I would hope that this would be a signal to give people movies that are fun, that movies that have depth and have tragedy in them, but can also be really uplifting, and to not make movies that try to tear people down and try to divide people and try to bring in real life problems and politics into them, because I think people need movies that are more uniting these days, and I think this was one of them. This was the movie this year. So Unfortunately, you can just be cynical and think that Hollywood is going to take the wrong lessons from this movie, and that's more likely the case, but I just hope that in the midst, when this is the one movie that's doing regular box office numbers and just blowing the box office out of the water this year, I hope when this is like the one movie standing on top like this, that they would hopefully take the right lessons from it and actually understand why people are going to see this movie. And it's more than just bringing back these actors who played these iconic characters. That's part of it, but it's more than that. It's how they handled it. So those are my thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home and why it's such a sensation right now. I love the movie. I'm gonna go see it many, many more times. I can't wait to continue this Spider-Man renaissance we're having right now. So what did you think of the movie? Let me know in the comments below. How many times did you go see it? And I'm gonna have a lot more videos for you next year. Thanks for watching.